Good evening, everybody. If you're able, please can I ask that you remain standing whilst my chaplain, Reverend Alan Saunders, offers prayers for this meeting.
Good evening, everybody. Warm welcome tonight. Just a few moments for some reflection time and some prayer. Feel free to join as you choose. Loving Father, dear God, we pray tonight for ourselves. Just taking a moment just to reflect and say thank you for the responsibility and the duty that you have placed on each of us. The trust that those who have voted for us have placed in us for this task, the duty to which you call us. And as we do so, Lord, we're ever so aware of our own failings. And just take a moment, if you wish, to say sorry for the times in which you've fallen short. Give us grace to do the task you've called us to view the needs of others and support them. Give us wisdom to make good decisions, and give us compassion to the needs of others, we ask. Lord, in your mercy, hear our prayer. And Lord, we pray for our wards. Take a moment to call to mind the needs that you're so aware of the people who live there, of the communities. Lord, help us to represent their needs well. Give us compassion and an openness to the opportunities in each of our wards. And to the needs, Lord, we pray for them. Praying, Lord, in your mercy, hear our prayer. And we lift before you our borough of Wigan and Lee. We pray for the difficult decisions we take at times to balance local and wider needs. We pray for opportunity for all. We ask for economic growth and prosperity across our borough of Wigan and Lee. And we pray that it may be a cleaner, greener, safer and healthier borough for everyone who lives there. Lord, in your mercy, hear our prayer. And may the blessing of God Almighty, the Father, the Son and the Holy Spirit be amongst you and remain with you always. Amen. Thank you.
Please be seated.
Thank you. Cheers.
Yeah, fine. No, it'll be okay. Right, good evening, everybody. I will just run through some housekeeping prior to tonight's business. We're not expecting a fire drill, therefore if one sounds, please can you follow officers who will lead you to the nearest fire exit, where we will gather at an assembly point in Belief Square. Officers will assist members of the public who are in the public gallery. Can I remind members of the need to respect each other, and I will of course chair these meetings fairly and to show impartiality. Members of the public are welcome, but should be aware that they should not interrupt the proceedings, as disruption may result in removal from the public gallery. The rules of conduct for the meeting have been circulated in advance of the meeting, and copies are available on your desks. And just a personal reminder to switch your mobile devices off or to silent and ensure that the volume is turned down on your laptop to prevent disruption from email alerts. If anybody needs any guidance on that, I'm sure members of Democratic Services or leaders of the relevant groups will oblige. I'm also being made aware that in Salford, the Mayor has instigated a £10 contribution towards the Mayor's charity for any member or officer who fails to oblige like that. But I'm not introducing that yet, so I'll give you all a chance. Item number 1 is apologies for absence.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. We have apologies for absence this evening from Councillor Gallagher, Councillor C Morgan, Councillor M Morgan, Councillor O'Brien, Councillor Reedy, Councillor Raymond, Councillor Talbot and Councillor Vickers. Do we have any further apologies this evening?
Can I give Councillor James Palmer's apologies? He will try to get here, but if he does, he'll be late. But he may not get here, so he sent his apologies.
Thank you, Deputy Leader.
Okay, on to item number 2, the minutes of the meeting held on the 24th of May. I will move acceptance of the minutes as a correct record.
Seconded, Mr Mayor.
Can I put the minutes to the vote? All those in favour of accepting the minutes, please show. Okay, that's carried. Item 3 are the Mayor's announcements. First of all, the King's Honours Awards. I'm delighted to share that we have 4 very worthy recipients of King's Honours Awards in our borough. Jonathan Dutton, OBE, for services to rugby, who's actually one of my constituents and lives very close to Councillor Guess, I understand. Peter Hart, MBE, for services to young people in Greater Manchester. Norman Brown, BEM, for services to young people in Greater Manchester. And our very own Emily Hyam, KPM, King's Policing Medal for services to policing. I've written to all of the aforementioned to congratulate them on receiving their prestigious awards. Item B is retirement of Paul McKevitt. I would like to take this opportunity to inform members of the forthcoming retirement of the Deputy Chief Executive, Paul McKevitt. After 30 years at Wigan Council and being the Chief Finance Officer since 2008, Paul has made a decision to retire at the end of August of this year. On behalf of the Council, I would like to thank Paul for the significant contribution he has made to Wigan Borough over this time. Paul has been instrumental in leading us through some of the most turbulent times in local government. I would wish him well in his retirement and the very best wishes for the new opportunities that lie ahead for him and his family. Item 4, declarations of interest. The Interim Monitor Officer has provided advice to all members and relevant guidance has been issued. Members are asked to consider relevant interest for the purpose of this meeting, and if there are any interest declared, members must leave the room during a relevant item. Please fill out the form on your agenda, return it to this Democratic Services officers at the end of the meeting. Okay, item 5, update from Cabinet portfolio holders. I think the first one I have is Councillor Anderton.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. In addressing Council today, I just want to highlight some of the key work streams and programmes that we're driving forward through the Place and Community Safety Partnership Board. The first one being that we are now well into year 2 of our domestic abuse bill and the new duties that were given to us as a borough that we have to adhere to. So, while safe accommodation continues to be an issue, not just locally but nationally for domestic abuse victims, we as a borough continue to invest in many of our support services. And these are services that are needed for victims and their families, but also under the new community contract currently being commissioned, a dedicated independent violence advisor now situated in the children's front door, and the use of advanced safety technology and digital platforms not only keeps victims safe, but also those who are vulnerable and in a younger age group as well. Secondly, through our co-working with GMP, I'd like to confirm that Operation Bluefin has been going from strength to strength, reducing antisocial behaviour reports this year by 35% compared to the previous year. But on top of that, we're continuing to invest. We're continuing to invest in proactive activities targeted predominantly at young people, specifically in areas like Goulburn and Loughton, Worsley Hall, Worsley Mains, Atherton, Tilsley, Hindley, Standish and Shevington. You'll see a bit of a pattern there about these areas that are on the kind of periphery of our borough. But also we're doing 2 additional nights per week of engagement, which will start immediately and run right the way through to mid-November. And this provision is also aligned with our holiday activities fund, so we can provide drinks and snacks to young people who are engaged with this provision as well. We're currently working as well on developing a strategic needs assessment for violence reduction strategy that we're legally obliged to complete by January next year. Currently, it's in the consultations phase, and I want to say that elected members will also be encouraged to take part in a consultation that's coming to both Wigan and Lee in the coming months. Again, we want your input to this, but what's clearly coming through in that consultation so far is the use of weapons, county lines, and also domestic abuse. They kind of seem to be our headlines at the moment, what people want to focus on. As a precursor as well to this new strategy, given the public health approach that's needed in this kind of space, we started also looking at secondary schools and those who are on the edge of exclusion to make sure that we keep people within mainstream educational settings as well, rather than taking away what can be some important life chances for young people. On this part, in regards to the neighbourhood policing model, that continues to be embedded across the borough and across Greater Manchester as well. The new neighbourhood crime team has already made significant increases in the number of enforcement actions that are taking place, particularly around burglaries, car thefts and robbery. The focus on neighbourhoods is also being mirrored by a new framework of organised serious crime. So sometimes we look at organised crime and we think it's the guns and the drugs, but it's anything that has an organised element to it. So it could be around tobaccos, vapes, whatever it might be. As long as there's an organised element, fraud and so on, we will be tackling that through this new board. But again, what has the council done to kind of match this? The board has also followed an approach in investing in our neighbourhood managers and our town centre managers to give them some funding to help additional problem solving in these difficult areas as well. So that brings our investment right the way down to a neighbourhood level. And we will continue to invest and work with our third sector partners as well. The next 6 to 12 months in this kind of portfolio and for the Community Safety Partnership Board is going to be a busy one. There's lots of legislative agendas coming down from the national level. Probably one that's worth mentioning at the moment is Operation Aurora, where we will continue to see a cultural shift within GMP to redouble down on crime and problem solving in a crime element, meaning that we have to work in partnership with GMP to deal with vulnerability. And I'm pleased to say that by February 2024, there's really good progress being made through our Community Safety Partnership Board to ensure that we have new pathways in place that can support vulnerability differently, but also cope with the increasing demand that we see. Finally, on Operation Avro, many of you would have seen the press. Operation Avro took place on the 22nd of June here in the Wigan Borough. And it had a nighttime and a daytime element. So in the nighttime activities, this involved also pooling resources with our neighbouring authorities, such as West Lancs, Merseyside. And there was a really good dedicated team. I was fortunate enough to go out with one of the policing teams that night as well and see it all in action. It brings a dry committee into life, if you like, to see those real challenges that they're facing. But it was a team of specialist officers with ANPR, dogs and many more to bring a kind of like a steel ring around Wigan. You're not getting in, and if anything's worth stopping, they stopped. And they followed through with several arrests that night as well. Interestingly, though, Wednesdays and Thursday nights, 11 drink and drug drivers were stopped that night. I didn't know Wednesdays and Thursdays were the new weekend, but apparently so in this borough. So from that, there was arrests around drug driving, drink driving, child neglect, dangerous driving.
Sorry to interrupt you, Councillor Anderton. Your 5 minutes is up. Thank you very much. Councillor Bullen, I believe, is next.
Thank you, Mr. for inviting me to speak. I'd just like a quick word about the government's response to the letter that was sent from this authority demanding free school meals for all children in primary school. And if you remember, we voted unanimously to support the motion. The response from Nick Gibb, MP, the Government Minister for Schools, was that it was a matter that would be kept under review, which actually seemed to mean no. The DFE letter described the current financial help that is available, and if you remember, I had acknowledged the sterling work of our Council's Here to Help team in getting help to families that really need it. But the threshold for free school meals is very low, meaning that many families are missing out, and we know that our children are going hungry. Universal free school meals for all primary children would alleviate financial pressures for so many families. What was interesting, that soon after we voted the motion, the national campaign, No Child Left Behind, really gathered momentum with a letter signed by faith leaders, public health, mayors, council leaders, MPs and lords. And I know that many members here signed that letter. This letter was delivered to the Prime Minister in Downing Street on the 29th of June. Guess what the response has been to this huge number of signatories from a wide range of organisations? The response? The matter is under review. Meanwhile, schools continue to tell us how dire the situation is for some of our families, and we know that staff are providing all the support they possibly can, sometimes out of their own pockets. In summary, Mr. Mayor, what can I say about this government, this Tory government, that seems to refuse to listen or to care for our children and families in poverty? And this will be the sad legacy that they leave behind. So let's just hope that their time in office is also a matter under review, and that it gets resolved sooner rather than later, with an incoming Labour government that wants to make a real difference to the current inequalities for our children and families. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bullen. Councillor Cunliffe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to give an uncharacteristically brief report, but I think one of the things I was particularly pleased about this year at our budget meeting was when we moved that all social care workers in this borough receive real living wage. At a time of financial pressure, not only on the council but on families and individuals, the fantastic work that many of our residents do, thousands of our residents working in the care sector do. And the care sector, unfortunately, many people in the care sector were paid national minimum wage. And so I think I was particularly pleased at this year's budget meeting to move that we pay all social care workers in this borough on commissioned services, the real living wage, and for direct payments to be adjusted such that people with personal assistance could ensure they could pay their personal assistant at real living wage. The other issue was there are services that we don't commission. We don't commission any of the care homes. So care homes are not commissioned by the council. But there are thousands of people in this borough, residents, who work in that sector. And so to make available, despite some objection by one of the members over there, I said that we would pay or make arrangements to pay for those working in the care home sector the real living wage. Now, we don't commission it and we don't employ them, so we have to work with the providers. And I'm pleased to say that we're only a couple of months into this financial year and 75% of the care homes in this borough have signed up to pay the real living wage to all their workers, which at times of financial stress is a great help for those people working in social care. And I think it's a credit to this council that we're able to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cunliffe, and you were very brief. Leader?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just really, mine will be brief as well, because I'm reporting back on two motions that went through council recently. And the first one asked me to write a letter to the Prime Minister with respect of WASPI. The motion put forward by Councillor Draper and seconded by Councillor Wales. It was interesting, we got the letter back pretty quickly actually. But they thanked us for our letter of the 27th of April to the Secretary of State and the Prime Minister about the women's state pension age. And I'm replying as the Minister of Pensions. This is by Laura Trott, MBE MP, Minister of Pensions. On the question of WASPI, I must make it clear that the Parliamentary and Health Service Ombudsman, PHSO, investigating into the Department's communications and changing to the women's state pensions is ongoing. It would not be appropriate to comment while this investigation is ongoing. And Section 7, Paragraph 2 of the Parliamentary Commissioners Act of 1967 states that the Ombudsman's investigation should be conducted in private. Well, that's a bit of a shock, isn't it? The Department is cooperating fully with the PHSO in their investigations, and what she doesn't say is that they will come back to us at some later date to tell us what those findings are. But can I just reiterate again tonight that this council will continue its support and will continue in the fight until the WASPI campaign is successful, and all the women who've been affected by this, many of whom will probably not live long enough to see the outcome of it, this council will stand by them, and we are prepared to see this through to the end. Another letter we got back was in relation to the DBS checks. If you remember, we discussed in here, and it was approved by every councillor who was here on that night, that we should write to the Minister, Michael Gove, in terms of DBS checks. And the letter also came back pretty quickly to tell us that an independent review had been taking place and was published on the 18th of April. And the recommendations are now for consideration by the government about introducing mandatory checks for all elected members. What it does say, it encourages councils to adopt the recommendation as a best code of practice until the legislation can be passed. Now, I do know that the vast majority of councillors in this chamber have already taken it upon themselves to do DBS checks, and now they are with Democratic Services. And can I thank the groups opposite who have? But can I just say, in September, at the council meeting, I'll give pre-warning now, we will put a motion to this council introducing mandatory checks in line with the government recommendation for all councillors within this chamber. And I will be more than happy to move that recommendation, and I'm sure the Deputy Leader will be more than happy to second it. So that's just giving a pre-warning to people that in September, that is a motion that will be coming to this council, and I will be looking for the full support of all members in this chamber. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Leader. We move on to item 5 now. Item 6A, which is vacant seats on committees. Following the report to annual council in May, a seat on both the licensing and regulation committees remains vacant. These positions have not been filled after a 3-week vacancy in accordance with provisions of the Section 15 of the Local Government Act 1990. Following correspondence with group leaders, nominations have been received for Councillor Harding and Councillor Hulton. Are these nominations moved and seconded? Okay. Somebody second that? Okay. Councillor Hulton, do we have somebody to nominate Councillor Hulton? Seconded? Okay. Do we have any members wish to contribute, or shall we put these members to the vote? Okay. All those in favour of Councillor Harding, please raise their hand. No. Okay. Thank you. And all those in favour of Councillor Hulton, please raise their hand. Anybody against? Okay. Both are passed, thank you. Item 6B, updates to the Constitution. The review following best practice report has been deferred to the next meeting of full council. The recommendation from the Constitutional Working Group that is being considered this evening is to change the name of the Competent Places Scrutiny Committee to the Competent Place and Environment Scrutiny Committee. Is this recommendation moved?
Happy to move, Mr. Mayor.
Seconded?
Beg to second, Mr. Mayor.
Do any members wish to contribute? Councillor Cunliffe? Okay. I will now move to the vote. All those in favour of accepting the recommendation, please show. Thank you. Anybody against? Thank you. The vote is carried. Item 6C is the Local Authority Governor Report. The Council is requested to approve the nominations for Governor vacancies and the reappointments set out on the report on page 55 of the agenda. I invite Councillor Bullen to move the recommendations.
To move the recommendations, Mr. Mayor.
Are the recommendations seconded?
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Leader. Do you wish to reserve your right to speak? Okay. Do any members wish to contribute? Do you wish to say anything else, Councillor Bullen, to sum up?
Nothing further, Mr. Mayor, thank you.
All those in favour of accepting recommendations as set out in the report, please show. Okay, thank you. Anybody against? Thank you. The vote is carried. Item 6D is the adoption of the all-parliamentary group definition of Islamophobia. The Council is requested to consider the report set out at page 61 of the agenda, which was previously considered by Cabinet, which requests it adopts the APPG definition of Islamophobia. I invite the Leader to move.
Happy to move, Mr. Mayor.
Seconded?
Beg to second, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Deputy Leader, do you seek to speak or reserve your right to speak? Okay. Do any members wish to contribute to this item? Councillor Byrne?
Can you hear me? Yeah. Oh, stand up, sorry. Sorry about that. It's just I do have some reservations because I do support the Maggie Oliver Trust that supports the young victims of the rape gangs, and we all know that they were ignored for a long, long time. And I would hate anything. I don't want anybody to be phobic against anybody, and Muslims or Islam. I think everybody has a right to practice their own religion, but I also think we have to also consider that people should never be afraid to speak out. Nobody should be persecuted because of religion, and I've stood up for that before, but I also think that nobody should be getting away with things also because of their religion, and we know that this has happened, and it did happen. So I do have some concerns. I think people should be able to speak out about wrongdoing, and I have concerns that young women as well should be able to speak out against forced marriage, FGM, and I just want to say there are some concerns that I have. It is good to not discriminate against anyone, but nobody should be afraid to speak out either in addressing these concerns. That's just all I wanted to say, really.
Do any other members wish to contribute? Or Councillor Jones?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And I wasn't here last meeting, so congratulations on your new position and everyone else who got re-elected or is newly elected. I want to put a little bit of a different spin on this, something I've not heard before in this council. And I actually want to thank the people of Wigan for being the most accepting, diverse people there are. We welcome people in from all shapes, all colours, whatever country they come from, whether they're fleeing war. We really are a town that could not be any better if it tried. But I don't think I've ever heard that, Mr Mayor. I always hear, we need to change this, we need to look at that. Why don't we just leave people alone, leave the words alone? We're all created by the same God, we bleed the same blood. So on behalf of me, well done to the residents of Wigan. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Okay, I'll invite the Deputy Leader to sum up if he wishes to. Leader, do you have anything to say?
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you for the comments, Councillor Jones. I just want to move the report. There's comments made there that probably shouldn't have been made on this report, but I'm more than happy to move the report that's in front of us today. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, all those in favour of accepting the recommendations as set out in the report, please show. Okay, thank you. All those against? Okay, the report is carried. Item 6E is the monitoring of urgent items and exemptions from calling. To report on page 67 of the agenda requests that the Council notes the key executive decisions that have been taken as urgent items pursuant to Rule 16 of the Access Information Procedure Rules and of any decisions that have been exempt from calling. Because the decision needs to be implemented as a matter of urgency since the 20th of July 2022, members are requested to note these decisions. Item 7A, Treasury Management Annual Review. At page 75 of the agenda, we have a report which was considered by the Cabinet at its meeting on the 6th of July 2023, which provides members with details of the Treasury Management activity for the year 2022-23 financial year. The Council is requested to agree the recommendation of Cabinet, which was to approve the Treasury Management position for 2022-23. I invite the Leader to move the recommendation.
Happy to move the recommendation, Mr Mayor.
Is the recommendation seconded?
Beg to second, Mr Mayor.
Okay. Does Councillor Cunliffe wish to reserve his right to speak? Do any members wish to contribute? Okay. In which case, Councillor Jones, sorry.
Mr Mayor, some good news reading through this Treasury report. We have managed to bring borrowing down, I think, roughly by about £80 million this year, so that's good. It's always a welcoming sign. We're still around about the £500 million mark, but what concerns me most in this report is, 12 months after we dipped into the deficit of around £20 million, I think it was, looking at the very open news story by yourself, Leader, you was very open about it. I worry about the direction the council's going. I think everybody in here is getting inundated with complaints. You're noticing that the houses aren't being repaired. You get complaints about weeds and grass cutting. It's not the officers' fault. We are in trouble. To me, with the deficit dipping in, the borrowing, I think this council is starting early signs of going bankrupt. I think 5 or 6 years of going into a deficit at that, we will have no money. That's a fact. People are laughing. £20 million, times it by 6, that's our reserves gone. And I'm not very good at maths. But what does worry me is that we've just undertaken a review into a lot of our assets. So we're potentially looking at selling all the allotment land that wasn't originally for allotment land, so it's not protected. The garage sites, the green spaces between council land, and a lot of this would improve. A lot of them are spots where we get antisocial behaviour. But I worry that the council is looking at pulling back the £20 million it's lost by selling assets, which might fix the problem this year, but next year we're going to be in the same problem. So I do seriously worry about our reserves and where we're going forward. And again, I've brought it up. We are spending a lot of money again this year investing in the town centre development. Is that really something we should be doing when we're having to sell other assets off and we're struggling with frontline services? One last thing I'll pick up on, but I've put a motion on so we can debate it more next meeting, is we have a handful of inspectors for council house repairs. We are seriously struggling and we're paying fortunes out to contractors who aren't doing a very good job. I think if we could bring that, look at starting to bring that in-house, that could also save money. And I hope the Cabinet, because this isn't criticism on you, can look at this asset review and let's just make sure that we don't sell off stuff that we might regret a few years down the line. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, Councillor Burrell, I believe you wish to make a contribution.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I've read this report, and what's strange about it, what are you borrowing the money for? There's nothing in the report what says you're borrowing money for. It just doesn't make sense. You know, if you want a new car, you borrow money, but you've got a product. Here, you're borrowing money for what product? We know the officers are struggling because they can't address half the issues we send in. But I believe you employed 1,000 people. Where are they? Where have they been employed? Or are they top heavy like a captain of a ship? You know what I mean? Was this no, too many chiefs and not enough Indians? Come on, you mean you've been running this borough for no matter how many years, and you still can't get it right. You know what I mean? You don't know anything about finance. You're paying all big wages, and you've no business experience. You know what I mean? A few years ago, the leader then went to an artist and said, I've got £125,000 to spend. And he says, yeah, you can have that. It could have been £60,000. But obviously no business experience. Well, I've got £125,000 here. Well, you can have it for that. That was a good businessman, that. He had it up for sale for 60 and sold it for 125,000. But yet, we've ended up with some rusty metal now, what's going to rot and rot and rot. And eventually, it'll fall down. And then we've got that big face. How much did we pay for that? You know what I mean? You put a statue there with Billy Boston. It's going rusty. And what did he achieve for this town? Unbelievable. Hey, don't mention hey, all. What do we do with hey, all? We employed, well, we gave the all away. And then he broke the lease. Then we couldn't have paid compensation because he broke the lease. And what did we do? Take him to court. Don't get that. He's broke the lease. I mean, then we had to give him £4.5 million. Right? But the best one ever I've ever heard is Three Sisters. He pays us £18,000 a year. And then we allow him, that company...
Councillor Bailey, can you just stick to the item on the agenda? You just strain a bit. Don't take too much notice of Councillor Jones.
Well, it's all about finance, you know, like Mayor, you know what I mean? Well, I'll just finish it off, that one. We allow him to charge £6,000 for the track, and he gets it. So why
Stick to
are
the
we not
matter.
taking
Stick to the
back?
point and the matter we're considering, please, Councillor Bailey.
So are we going to learn any lessons in here? Are we?
Just talk on the item if you want to continue,
I'm asking
Councillor
a
Bailey.
question. Leader, are we going to learn any lessons here? I'll tell you the best lesson you can learn.
Councillor
is putting
Brearley,
independence on the cabinet.
address your comments to Council Chamber. Perhaps if you've had enough, sit down for the time being.
Right. You don't like the truth, do you? You know what I mean?
Thank you. Do we have any other contributions? Maybe the Deputy Leader might want to sum up.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillor Jones, I know you talk about the debt, but you need to understand the difference between the housing revenue account and the general fund. The housing revenue account has some borrowing and deficit, 100 million of it virtually forced on us by the government several years ago, and that's in the housing revenue account. But then we have the asset of 20-odd thousand council houses in the borough, so not a big debt on that, and we have significant house building and specialist housing that's required for our older people. Wharfdale in Lee opened earlier this year, and Eldervale in Beach Hill will be opening very shortly to provide much needed accommodation for older people and housing with extra care. So when you take away the housing revenue account borrowing and look at the council borrowing in terms of what we spend in our budget is very low gearing, so it's not a great deal. And it's interesting that people over, and I appreciate, Councillor Jones, that you did support the budget this year. Unfortunately, many over there didn't. And actually, during austerity, this council has lost £170 million from government cuts. No comment from over there about the impact that's had on the borough. Nothing. And then we have people saying, and like I say, Councillor Jones supported the budget, but despite the financial situation, the cost of living, things going up, they oppose a 5% council tax increase. So actually, and the 7% rent increase, which was below inflation, and then ask us to do all these things about improving housing, but actually vote for no rise at all, making us even worse financially to be able to do the things that are demanding. So they take no responsibility for it. Oh, don't raise council tax, don't raise rents, but then want us to spend more and more and more, despite the fact that we've had those huge cuts. And never a word from over there about the cuts that this Tory government's put on us. Thank you.
Leader, do you want to say anything? Yeah. What could you please indicate which law or rule or procedure from the council's constitution has been breached, and also outline how this has been breached? So which point of order is that? I think the contribution's been concluded now, so I think we'll move on to the Leader's contribution.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Deputy. Thank you, Councillor Joel. Councillor Bailey always wants to ask questions, and you can give him answers. Does he ever listen? Does he think you're telling the truth? Never. So all I can say is the report's before us. It's been through every committee and investigation or whatever else it needs to go through, and I'm more than happy to move the report. And this council is we're still in control of this council. Now, can I just say I never interrupted Councillor Brearley.
Councillor Brearley, do you really have to? Could you please... Councillor Brearley, please be quiet while I'm speaking. Could you please indicate which part of your early speech appears to have been misunderstood, then clarify this?
I've been through every committee, I've done this, I've done that. I mean, what are you talking about? Are you frightening me against the truth?
It's not a point of explanation, Councillor Brearley.
We had dirty deals in the audit, didn't we?
No,
Brearley, now, come on.
Can I just
It's not a point of explanation. Leader.
Can I just say, I said the report. And if I heard it right, It started off with a question. And I've answered the question that when I answer it, they'll not believe it anyway. So I've answered it. All I can say, Mr. Mayor, I'm more than happy to move this report. And once again, it shows the reason why we've been in charge of this council for so long. Despite certain accusations which are totally trying to mislead people, I'm happy with the report and I recommend it to the council. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. Can I ask all those in favour of accepting the recommendation as set out in the report to show? Thank you. Any against? Any? Perhaps you can move it.
Just say to Councillor Braley, you understand you wanted that seat.
My understanding, Councillor Braley, that particular seat was your special request, which has been granted for you. So I think it's a case of staying there, and hopefully your blindness might not be long-lived. Come on, Councillor Braley, calm down. Come on. You'll be okay in a minute or two, Councillor Braley, don't worry. Anybody, any abstentions on this item? Okay, the vote is carried. Right, so there's no questions or comments at item 9. So we move on to the notice of motions. And the first one is a motion that has been submitted by Councillor Kenny, which is set out on page 95 of the agenda. Councillor Kenny?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Dentists not only solve problems, they can prevent them. Potential problems they can spot include the onset of gum disease and dental decay. When it comes to oral health, it is important you are proactive and seeing your dentist regularly so that they can catch any issues early before they become a problem. A quick Google search of dental websites, and I came across that statement on a dental website, Mr. Mayor. Fine words. But in Wigan and the wider country, there is a major problem. A problem that has actually been getting worse over the last decade, with the root causes being well understood during that time, but no real action has been taken to address the issue. Mr. Mayor, statistics can tell us a lot about the services we use day to day. And I want to provide just a very quick snapshot of dental provision in Wigan. And I'm thankful to the British Dental Association in this respect for providing the figures. In 2015, 57% of adults were seen by a dentist in the borough. In 2022, that figure had dropped to 43%. In 2016, 65% of children were seen by a dentist, but in 2022, that figure was 51%. And nationally, tooth extraction in hospitals is the most common reason for hospital admission in the 6 to 10 year age group. Now, like me, members may know from their own personal circumstances, or indeed from constituents who may have contacted them, that there is a crisis within our dental services in the borough. The crisis is primarily around access. Practices often advertise that they're taking on NHS patients, but actually when you ring the practice, you find that they are no longer doing so. Appointments are routinely cancelled, often at short notice, not once, twice, but in my own personal circumstances, I've had dental appointments cancelled 3 times in succession on me, and this is not uncommon. We also have a revolving door of dentists coming and going at practices, so we often never see the same dentist once and unable to build that relationship between patient and dentist, which many people value. And indeed, during the cost of living crisis, engineered in number 10 Downing Street, the issue around affordability of treatment is now a real issue for many of our residents. And it brings me to the fact that I even read this week, when I was doing some of the research ahead of tonight, that there's an example of people who are undertaking their own do-it-yourself tooth extractions. And Amazon boasts that it's now selling more and more do-it-yourself dental kits. So I said at the start, Mr Mayor, that this is a problem of many years in the making. The current government acknowledged this problem as far back as 2010, and the influential Health and Social Care Select Committee produced a damning report recently which reinforces the need for urgent action in a number of key areas. The first key area is the reform of the dental contract itself. The current contract disincentivises the seeing of new patients, and indeed those patients who have higher needs because of disease and issues with their dentistry, due to the fact that there isn't appropriate remuneration in the system to pay dentists for their work. So fundamental reform of the dental contract is essential and must be urgently introduced. We also need the government to introduce incentives to attract and retain dentists. And yes, very much in the short term, they must speed up the process to allow overseas dentists who want to practice within our NHS to do so. And we also need to look at how we can introduce greater flexibility into how we deliver services locally. Indeed, in this respect, and I'm sure that Councillor Cunliffe will be aware, our local integrated care board is taking the lead on this issue with the introduction of a new quality scheme that came in June this year. Early signs are very encouraging in terms of additional patients who have been seen and the number of practices that have joined the scheme. However, I come back to the central point. By itself, this will not fully address the issues that face dentistry in Wigan and the wider country. So to conclude, Mr Mayor, the picture is bleak, but it doesn't have to be. In integrated care boards, we have the opportunity and the possibility to target local services to local needs, but the time for action is running out. The government must put NHS dentistry on a secure, long-term footing, but in a way that enables our constituents to see a dentist in a reasonable time frame, straight away if necessary, and rewards our dental professionals in a manner that ensures that they remain within the family of the NHS. To date, Mr Mayor, the government have been missing in action. Dentists have been voting with their feet and leaving the NHS, and patients in Wigan have been paying with their teeth. We need NHS dentistry fit for the modern world. Let us get on with it and do it now. I move the motion in my name, Mr Mayor.
Is the motion seconded?
Seconded, Mr Mayor.
Okay. Do you wish to reserve your right to speak, or?
Mr Mayor.
Okay. Do other members wish to contribute to the motion? Councillor Jones, is it we have first? Yep. Okay.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. First of all, I'll be supporting your motion. No problem at all, but I think you've chose the wrong person. If I'm honest with Councillor Kenny, I'm writing to the government, because that's the same individual that's just been saying how we should stop criticising everything and work with them, get stuff done, and spends every single minute, even when it's irrelevant, calling the government, and now is going to write to them asking for support. And you imagine you're the government and you pick up a letter from Wigan Council talking about how to run services proper. So I think your motion would be far better coming from the Chief Executive, or even better. Why don't we get the Greater Manchester Mayor and the MPs involved and actually have some weight behind it? Because as much as I like the leader, and personally I do like the leader, he does nothing but criticise and then tells us we shouldn't criticise. He takes every swipe, even when there's only 2 Conservatives left, no disrespect intended, it's still their fault for everything, and then says we should be writing to the government. And in closing, Mr Mayor, a very interesting comment made at the count with some of the Ashton councillors, the Bullens, saying, they call me Boris Johnson. And I've been racking my brain, trying to wonder, what could I possibly have in common with Boris Johnson? But then I realised it's because every time me or Boris are up against you in an election, we win with a huge majority. So thank you very much for your compliments. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Now, I welcome this motion. I think for the past 4 years, all I've been crying on about, like a broken record, is investment in our infrastructure. And I think we can all agree that all our local health services are beyond breaking point. So I often ask the question to how we've got here and what is the root cause of this issue. So, yeah, root cause, yeah, dental joke. So I think we've got to look at ourselves, particular in the mass urbanisation of our towns. Now, for example, I'll give Atherton for an example. In the past census, 10 years, population in Wigan's gone up by 3.6%. But in the same time frame, the population of Atherton has gone up by 30%. We stagnated for over a century at a population of 20,000. Today's population is 26,000. And with the future builds going in play, that are planned during the, whether that's from Place for Everyone or the local plan 2040, that's going to make our population surpass 30,000, which is a 50% increase. So I think the problem is sometimes the mass urbanisation of our towns, and we have got to look at our inwards rather than looking outwards, that we've had a hand to play in this as well. And there's many factors around it. But I do agree that we've got to put more incentive on retaining and recruiting more dental technicians, because I think we need that. But like I say, I'm fully supportive of this motion. But I think it's come too little, too late, and we should have put more strategic foresight into all these buildings and developments, which I've always been against. I don't think it's needed, but I am supportive of this, so thank you for the motion. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. I believe Councillor Brearley, you want to make a contribution?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This is to the leader. He keeps saying I don't learn anything. I remember a few years ago that we in Wigan and Greater Manchester run our own NHS. We took it over from the government. Is that correct? NHS, you know what I mean? So why we keep calling this Labour, this Tory government? We run our own budgets. I actually wrote to the government and said, can you step into Wigan because they're not doing a good job? And I had a reply back, you run your own budgets, we just give you the money. So, and you keep calling them all the time, and it's you what's running the show. And you've just borrowed, you just told us you're borrowing all this money. Why don't you put it into dentistry? I said, and for Councillor Kenny...
Keep to the motion, please, Councillor Brearley. You just strain a little bit.
Why do you always say that, Mr Mayor?
Let's get back on track with it.
Yeah.
Just want to keep you on the right track, Councillor Brearley, on dentistry.
You never say this to anybody else.
He's only keeping you on track.
What?
He's only keeping you on track.
Well.
At least he's not shut you down.
Yeah. Right, going back to Mr Kenny. Well, isn't he in a position, actually working for the MP, to do a better job than us? Because he's got direct contact. He must have contacts in London to address this further. A lot better. I suggest that you get on with it, Councillor, and report back to us and give us some support. Thank you.
Councillor Cunliffe, do you want to come and clarify matters?
Yeah, thank you. I can assure everybody that this council has never run the NHS. Ever. The NHS is funded directly from government, and it funds the NHS, it funds NHS England, which then fund the new ICBs, the Greater Manchester ICB, that then fund the NHS and the providers. So we have never funded that. And in terms of some of the things Councillor Watson was saying, how did the NHS get in this state? Well, it's quite simple. When the NHS was formed in 1948, over that period, up until 1997, the average increase in NHS expenditure was about 4% per year. During the Tory government prior to 97, they reduced that funding, and we had huge waiting lists. We had huge waiting lists and long waiting lists for operations and elective surgery. The Labour government of 1997 to 2010 invested 6% per year in the NHS, and the waiting list virtually vanished. And since the Tories came in 2010, the average increase in NHS spend has been about 1% a year. And that's why we're in the difficulty that we're in now. Now, this is about dentistry, and dentistry has become a real issue for people across the whole of the country. In some places, it's virtually impossible to get an NHS dentist appointment. Councillor Kenny indicated some of the work that GM are doing and we're doing around GM about trying to improve dentistry. And it's the government we have to write to, because it's the government who are responsible for the NHS. And let's not forget, even if you can get an NHS dentist, bearing in mind, do you know what the costs are for an NHS appointment at a dentist? For a checkup, it's £28.50. For a fill-in, it's £70.70. And if you require a crown or a bridge or root canal work, it's £306.80. It's an appalling situation when people on low wages and low income are having to pay that. And that's why, as Councillor Kenny says, people are suffering, particularly young people and children. And so it's not only access to dentistry, it's about the charges as well. Because actually, if you need treating within 2 months of receiving treatment, that's all right. You'll get it done for the same price that you paid earlier, unless it's a higher band of treatment that you require, in which case you'll pay that. Once you've passed 2 months of receiving treatment, if you require more treatment, you have to pay the whole damn thing again. So there is a real serious issue for government to address in terms of dentistry for the population of this country and NHS dentistry.
Thank you, Councillor Cunliffe. We move on to Councillor Gerard.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Fully support this motion, and as someone who's just had crown work done at a dentist, the appointment time was 2:30, I kid you not. Having crown work done, I don't know which is the most painful, the actual work without anaesthetic or paying the bill afterwards. So there we go. But we have to get, again, no pun intended, root cause of the problem. There's a shortage of dentists coming through the actual system. And in February 23 this year, there was £400 million unspent on dentist appointments. And that's from the quick Google. But we also have to look at, and this may have to go into the letter, what the NHS contract involves with the dentistry. Because they're restricted to the amount of patients they can see. So we may have to look at widening that. And a lot of the dentists are having to do private work to subsidise the NHS work, because they're not getting the figures through. Because a lot of the dentists are running at a loss. But we also have to encourage our own constituents to actually go to the dentist when they have an appointment. When I went, it was only last month, on the board there was 89 missed appointments. And that was in the dentistry. And people, like I said, people are crying out to see a dentist. So if you have got a dentist, you don't want to get struck off, make sure you go to that appointment, because other people want to see that dentist. You know, so fully support the motion, but I think we have to look at the cause of why these appointments are being missed. Why is there a shortage of dentists? And I think it's the restriction of the dentist appointments they can see, or the amount of patients they can see. So thank you.
Thank you for that contribution, Councillor Gerard. And Councillor Whittingham.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I fully support this motion. But what I would like to point out, after all the Tory bashing from the Deputy Leader and quite a bit from Councillor Kenny, he did state that the Conservative government produced a damning report in 2010. So we can only assume that the previous government made a right mess of it. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Marshall, did you want to speak?
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Kenny, for bringing this motion to the Chamber. Can I just say, as a former dental nurse within the NHS, albeit a good few years ago, over the years I've seen the decline of the NHS dentistry, people struggling to get appointments, the length of time it takes. Health services have been cut. That your check-up used to be every 3 months, now it's every 6 months if you're lucky. Lots of dentists are having to issue payment plans. I think it's absolutely disgraceful. Thanks again, Councillor Kenny. I will be supporting this motion and I urge others in this chamber to also do the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. I'll move on to Councillor Conway, I think, if you wish to contribute, because you reserved your right to speak.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This will be short and to the point. Surely nobody in the chamber can disagree with Councillor Kenny's motion. It's totally unacceptable that in the 21st century, people are resorting to pulling out their own teeth. I mean, where are we going with this? Something's got to be done. They can't afford the fees, and there's just not enough NHS dentists. People are in extreme pain, and children with terrible tooth decay are waiting up to 18 months. I put 18 months when I wrote this. I've read today it's 3 years in some cases. And that's for treatment in hospital. Every person has a right to access NHS dentists within a reasonable distance from the home. And I think that's only been touched on a little bit tonight. People are getting NHS dentists, but quite away from home. And it must also be in a reasonable time frame. This disgraceful situation needs to be addressed as soon as possible. I urge everyone present to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Conway. Councillor Kenny, do you wish to sum up?
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you to members for their contributions tonight. I'll try and touch on some of the points that have been made. I hope I've got this in the right order. Councillor Jones, I think you were supporting the motion. I do thank you for that. The reason that we're writing to the government is because some of the reforms that are required can only be initiated by the government. As much as we may well have local initiatives here.
Could you please indicate which part of your early speech appears to have been misunderstood and clarify that?
We use somebody else that don't criticise the government all the time. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Carry on, Councillor Kenny.
Well, with respect, Mr Mayor, we do need people to criticise the government, and on this side of the chamber, we will do so when it's necessary to do so. In terms of the workforce issues, though, I do take on board the point that he makes, and once again, we still await the NHS workforce plan, which will play a key role, not just in dentistry, but also in the rest of the NHS. Councillor Watson, can I thank you for your support as well? You did raise a number of issues there, which I think touch on other issues and other aspects of policy. On the plus side, though, although the situation in Wigan has deteriorated, there are parts of the country that are in a far worse position than us, particularly the east of the country. You may have heard the concept of deserts developing. Well, in some parts of the country, I think we're nigh on the Sahara Desert in terms of provision, but that isn't the case here. Councillor Cunliffe once again gave a very pertinent contribution, and Councillor Gerrard, thank you once again for your support of the motion. And that just brings me back to Councillor Braley. And all I can say at this point, Mr Mayor, is that I've sat here for many years listening to Councillor Braley and the points that he wishes to make before the council. And I've finally been reminded of a very famous quote by Abraham Lincoln, the famous President of the United States, who said that it was better to be thought a fool and remain silent than to speak and remove all doubt.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Kenny. I'm going to put the motion to the vote now. All those in favour of the motion, please show. Okay, I believe that is unanimous. Motion number 2 has been submitted by Councillor Wakefield and it's set out on page 95 of the agenda. Councillor Wakefield.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, for allowing me to present this motion. Mr Mayor, on average, 2 women a week are killed by a current or former partner. 1 in 4 women will experience domestic abuse in their lifetime. It is estimated that around 3 women a week die by suicide as a result of domestic abuse. 20% of children in the UK have lived with an adult perpetrator of domestic abuse. 41% of UK girls aged 14 to 17 in an intimate relationship experience some form of sexual violence from their partner. 93% of defendants in domestic abuse cases are male. 84% of victims are female. Domestic abuse costs the UK an estimated £23 billion a year. Mr Mayor, the White Ribbon Campaign is a global movement of men and boys working to end male violence against women and girls. It was formed by a group of men in Canada in November 1991 as a response to a massacre in 1989. The massacre resulted when a 25-year-old man slaughtered 14 women because of his hatred towards women. The campaign was intended to raise awareness about the prevalence of male violence against women. It is active in over 60 countries, and the movement seeks to promote healthy relationships, gender equity, and a compassionate vision of masculinity. White Ribbon is the UK's leading charity engaging men and boys to end violence against women and girls. The reality is that most violence against women is committed by men. White Ribbon's mission is to prevent men's violence against women and girls by addressing its root causes, harmful and dominant masculine norms. White Ribbon strives to change long-established attitudes, behaviours and systems around masculinity that bolster gender inequality and men's violence against women. White Ribbon UK's work is preventative, ending violence before it starts. White Ribbon want to make sure that all men realise that they can take responsibility for thinking about their own actions, promote equality and respect, and are prepared to call out harassing, sexist and violent behaviour when they see it in others. To put things into perspective, I would like to tell you about 2 brothers, Ryan and Luke Hart, who are both White Ribbon ambassadors. Their story demonstrates the importance of the White Ribbon campaign. In July 2016, Luke and Ryan's mum and sister were coming out of their local swimming baths. They made their way across the car park towards their car. As they approached the car, a man crawled out from underneath. It was Luke and Ryan's dad, Lance Hart. Lance held up a sawn-off shotgun and killed Ryan and Luke's mum, then their little sister, before killing himself. This was the end of nearly 3 decades of controlling and coercive behaviour and was only 4 days after Ryan and Luke's mum had decided to leave their dad. They didn't think he was dangerous, as they hadn't seen his behaviour as domestic abuse, because they had only ever considered domestic abuse to be a man hitting a woman. So what is a domestic abuse? Thanks to the Domestic Abuse Act 2021, we now have a more detailed definition. Domestic abuse is not always that stereotype that we first think of, the woman cowering in the corner whilst her partner is standing over hitting her. Domestic abuse is much more than domestic violence. It is controlling and coercive behaviour, honour-based abuse and forced marriage, economic abuse and psychological abuse. And as we've just heard, these forms of domestic abuse are just as dangerous and can end in families devastated. The impact of domestic abuse on the lives and well-being of residents and communities across the Wigan Borough is significant. In 2022, over 700 people in Wigan were deemed to be at high and imminent risk of being murdered or seriously injured as a result of domestic abuse. 89% of victims that accessed the IDVA service in Wigan in 2021 were women. The cost of domestic abuse in Wigan on the economy is estimated to be approximately £31 million a year. It is essential that we work proactively in partnership to prevent domestic abuse from happening in the first instance. We must also ensure that we provide the best possible care to support families affected by domestic abuse at the earliest possible opportunity, and also to use every available resource to address perpetrators of abuse. Domestic abuse is a complex social issue, and not one single agency can successfully reduce its prevalence and support those in need in our borough. It needs a partnership across the whole community. Mr Mayor, in our borough, we have already done so much to support this vital priority. Unfortunately, I don't have time to list everything that we are doing, but if you attended the recent domestic abuse seminars, you would have got a flavour of the vast amount of work going on in our borough. A few highlights are our multi-agency risk assessment conference, known as MARAC, is one of the best in GM. This is a meeting where information is shared on the highest risk domestic abuse cases. This is attended by many agencies and is held 3 times a week. We have a council-commissioned quality emergency refuge provision. One of the best independent domestic violence advisor teams, also known as IDVAs, in Greater Manchester. IDVAs are specialist professionals who work with and support victims and families of high-risk domestic abuse cases. A network of domestic abuse champions across partner agencies, various perpetrator programmes which start from the age of 13, and we have a relatively new and exciting line of work which started in November 2022. This is called MATAC, which is short for Multi-Agency Task and Coordination. It is designed to identify and work with the top 10 repeat serial perpetrators of domestic abuse in our borough. We are now on cohort 4, but just from the first 2 cohorts, that's 20 perpetrators, there's already a significant saving to GMP and partners. And GMP are now looking to roll this out across, further across GM. We have early intervention programmes aimed at education settings like Operation Encompass. We have a dedicated local domestic abuse helpline, which is open to residents, family members, friends and professionals. A thriving experts by experience group, which is a group of residents who have real life experience of domestic abuse and are having a real influence on local strategy and operations. We have an award-winning media and comms campaign, which is called Love is Not Abuse, and was designed by that experts by experience group. And an amazing council-commissioned Wigan Borough Domestic Abuse Service, which is led by our local teams, Dias and Wellwomen, and we've all got a leaflet for that. Mr Mayor, I would just like to read out some of the most recent feedback that the Domestic Abuse Service has received from residents who use it. I was close to giving up and giving in, but you made me feel really empowered and reassured that I could do it and keep fighting. The service allowed me to leave in an abusive relationship that I don't feel I would have had the strength to leave if I did not seek support. You've been the best. I didn't even know places like this existed, but when I came to you, I could talk and be open and honest. When I spoke to you, you was brilliant and made me feel at ease. I felt so comfortable talking to you like I would a friend. You should get a medal for what you do. Mr Mayor, we need to build a community of change makers. Our voice is strengthened by the whole community working together to build capacity, educate, and raise awareness to bring about change. Not one single person, agency, charity will end domestic abuse. It is up to all of us to work together. As part of our ongoing commitment to improve the journey of those affected by domestic abuse, we need to continue to change the culture in Wigan Borough. Domestic abuse needs to be as socially unacceptable as drink driving. And tackling domestic abuse needs to remain high on our agendas. We will continue to ask all who live, work in or visit the borough to join us in pledging that we will not tolerate or accept any form of domestic abuse. As elected members, you can be a key part of this. And I ask that all members wear your white ribbons and to take the white ribbon pledge to never use, excuse or remain silent about men's violence against women. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wakefield, for that very passionate speech. Is the motion seconded?
Happy to second, Mr Mayor.
Do you wish to speak on the motion or reserve the right to speak until later?
I'll speak now, please. Thank you. Thank you, Mr Mayor, for allowing me to speak. The White Ribbon Campaign is about awareness. The White Ribbon Campaign is about prevention. And the White Ribbon Campaign is about action. I'm pleased that we support the campaign as Wigan Council, and I'm proud how we engage and market throughout the year, focusing on awareness, on prevention and on action. Young people are at the heart of the deal and everything that we do. So I'm delighted we're able to welcome members of our Youth Cabinet here tonight. And young people are at the heart of a vital piece of work we do in Wigan to end violence against women and girls and all gender-based violence. I want to speak about the fantastic work we do with schools through our partner Wigan Borough Domestic Abuse Service. All schools in Wigan Borough are offered free sessions on healthy relationships, and they are delivered in schools by a specialist trainer. The programme recognises that children may be living in a household where domestic abuse is prevalent, and also they can be our victims and perpetrators of the future. The aim is to educate them around a range of subjects and to increase knowledge and to reduce this risk. The programme used is Expect, Respect. It's a prevention toolkit, and it's around healthy relationships, and it meets the need of the PSHE, Personal, Social and Health Education curriculum. All sessions are age appropriate. They're fun, they're interactive, and they're engaging to facilitate conversations around the root causes of abuse and to educate children and young people about gender-based violence, to be preventative, just as the White Ribbon campaign aims. Some of the themes covered by these sessions are challenging assumptions about gender, power and equality, changing beliefs and attitudes about men and women, managing feelings, and accepting responsibility for one's own feelings and for one's own behaviours, and knowing the difference between abusive and non-abusive relationships. These sessions in school are vital awareness and preventative work, and we should be proud that it's delivered in our borough schools. Over 100 schools have participated in these sessions, and over 12,000 children have been reached. And I mention this work tonight particularly because I know many members are school governors, and I ask that part of our pledge tonight, I ask you to go back to your school and ask, are they making the most of this offer? Because we must educate our young people about healthy relationships, about gender inequalities, to prevent gender-based violence in the future. Go back to your schools, take action, and lead. We as a council, as an organisation, should lead by saying that we will never use, excuse, or remain silent about violence against women and girls and all gender-based violence. We do this with our awareness campaigns. We do this with our preventative work in schools, and we do this with our actions. And as elected members, we need to lead as individuals. Last December at our full council meeting, and again this evening, our staff and most elected members are taking the pledge to never use, excuse, or remain silent, and to wear the white ribbon. I urge all elected members to take the lead tonight, to lead by example. Lead with your actions. Take the pledge that today and every day throughout the year, you will never use, you will never excuse, and you will never remain silent about men's violence against women. Take action tonight and vote for this motion. Thank you.
Okay, do any other members wish to contribute? Councillor Byrne?
Speak, Mr Mayor. Thank you very much for those motions. I totally agree with you on everything that you've said. But I am quite offended that I was told earlier that when I was speaking about male violence against women, that I'd raised things in this chamber that shouldn't have been raised. And I just want that point noted, please. I was talking about all male violence against women. None should be excused. despite the ethnicity, the religion or anything of the perpetrator. All male violence against women is to be condemned.
Councillor Jones, I think you wish to make a contribution.
Mr. Mayor, I've always believed in life, if you feel intimidated from a subject, you should talk about it. So I'm going to talk about a big elephant in the room, because in the past, councillors, rightly so, have referred in slight remarks towards myself. So I want to make this clear. When somebody makes a mistake or does something wrong, it doesn't mean that they don't disagree with that. It doesn't mean that they don't work on themselves to address situations and to make themselves better. So I agree 100% with your motion, bar one bit. You say about the percentage of domestic abuse is aimed at women. If you look at other statistics, I should tell you that 50% of men don't report domestic abuse, and it's often done in different forms. So I think as a council that we should be against domestic abuse in all ways. And I'm going to be quite open. I speak, and this is proven, on being on both sides of that incident, that domestic abuse is wrong all in all. The biggest thing we can do is get out relationships when they get toxic, which many of us don't do. And all I will say is, when you're a councillor, you see the headline. You don't always know what the full story is. And yeah, I agree. I don't think anybody's going to disagree. Domestic violence is bad, but sometimes it does come across as if you're purely politicising it from a woman's point of view. It happens all over. A lot of the time, it's done psychologically for a long, long time, putting men down, making them feel a certain way, having affairs, sticking it in the man's face, to a lot of the time where the man feels like maybe he doesn't even want to get up in the morning. And his actions might not always then necessarily be what actions should be. There's no point shaking your head. I'm not on about me. I'm on about in general. So is there anything wrong with saying, let's be against domestic abuse, violence from all sides? And the education side, you say, I could not agree with more than what you said. Controlling emotions and identifying why things do go wrong in the first place. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And first of all, may I congratulate Councillor Wakefield on a very passionate motion which we're all firmly behind. This will be unanimously passed, I hope so anyway. And also to Councillor Flynn for bringing up about education. And for me, it's all about education of the next generation. It's all about breaking that cycle of that learned behaviour which generally comes from the household, and it repeats itself generation after generation. So for me, it's all about the schools. I think White Ribbon Day this year is on the 25th of November. So I'd like to see a big push in the schools. I'd like to empower young people with that knowledge, so if they become victims of any forms of domestic abuse in the future, they've got the confidence for themselves, they've got the confidence in us, they've got the confidence in support agents available to report this, so we can alleviate all forms of domestic abuse from our society. Brilliant, fully behind this, well done. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Guest.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Please bear with me because this is a very emotive subject that also angers me as well. One of the points that Councillor Wakefield brought up was 1 in 4 women. If you look around this chamber, there are at least 40 women in this room. I want to speak up on behalf of those women. I am one of those statistics. It's over 20 years ago, but it stays with you. So please excuse me if I'm a little bit emotional, but I wish that there was this kind of support 20 years ago, because believe me, it doesn't matter how good a relationship gets. I have had 15 fabulous years with my partner, yet I still break down, I still blame myself. So I am fully behind this, and I cannot commend this council highly enough for being behind. And I know all violence against anybody is wrong, and I know men don't always speak up, but statistically, it's the women who suffer the worst violence, being killed, being stalked. The list is endless. So I do agree, all violence should stop, but please seek support if you know somebody or you are one of those. Thank you.
Thank you for that contribution, Councillor Guest. I think it was well received across the chamber. Councillor Briley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I went to one of your seminars. I was advised not to go, actually, because of the ridicule you're heading towards all men. Yeah, there's some violent men out there, a lot of violent men out there. But we're getting tarred with every man in here now is being tarred with the same brush. The motion says men against women. Well, at that seminar, you told me 750,000 men reported violence against them by women. I know the figures you told me that women reported 1.5 million voted, 1.5 million, but there is a lot of women who bully men. They did a programme on it on Coronation Street, Tyrone. He wouldn't come forward. Why? Because he felt intimidated. He felt like if he could speak out, then everybody would criticise him, call him soft, why don't you stand up to her? But when a man's not got that in him for fight back, then this is what happens. You know, there's like it said, how many men does not report it? Right? Now, what is domestic violence? I'll tell you what it is. Not washing them pots. That's how bad it is. And when you meet your partner, I bet there's loads of people in here divorced who's gone through a domestic violence. When you meet your partner, you're in love. You get married, you don't know anything about them. What triggers that violence in all partnerships? Gay men, they fight like hell, they do. I mean, they attack each other.
I think you're making some rather, stick to the motion, please. And this is domestic abuse as well.
Well, it's all abuse, Mr Mayor. It's all abuse. I'm helping 3 women in this council about being bullied. Abuse.
Stick to the motion, Councillor Braley, please. Respect other people.
Well, it's all abuse, Mr Mayor. I think this motion should be changed to all abuse. I mean, I've been abused. I've been abused a few times, but I've always come out of it. Why? Because I've not got a criminal record. Mr Leader, you can do any checks you want on me.
Stick to the motion, please. There's no need to make that reference. And sit down, Councillor Braley.
No.
Councillor Braley, have you finished?
No.
Okay,
no,
be brief. Be brief and to the point.
I just feel bullied, Mr Mayor. I just feel bullied all the time. In this chamber, you've got 5 minutes to speak. But every time I speak, you interrupt me. And I know why you do it. Oh, let's wind Bob Briley up. We can shut the meeting down because we don't want to finish the meeting. Read the rules, Mr Mayor. Thank you.
Councillor Anderton next.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. At one point I was going to say, what a robust debate, but wow, what some stereotypes have just come out from that side over there. Wow, absolutely wow. I think absolutely the support offer here in Wigan is really good. It's second to none. It's, I'd say, one of the best in Greater Manchester. And I would absolutely say, again, I want to thank Councillor Wakefield, Councillor Flynn, who held this portfolio last year as well. And it's great to have Councillor Wakefield back in this portfolio. I think you bring a lot of experience as well to this role, having held it before. I think just addressing the motions, yes, about violence against women. And yes, all of the other stuff that I mentioned in my update around the serious violent crime, that's about the victim. And I think, yeah, it's about all gender-based victims in this space. And I just want to kind of get that across. The motion tonight, yes, is about the Right Ribbon campaign, and yes, about violence towards women. And the statistics do show that. We've got that in evidence, that hard fact. But I think we don't lose sight. I don't think none of my colleagues here lose sight, and none of us should lose sight. It's all gender-based violence. Is that what we're standing here against as well? So all I want to say about that. Thank you.
Councillor Callaghan.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to thank Councillor Wakefield for actually standing up and having the strength to do what you've just done. And I'll tell you, I am one of those women you've just spoke about. It might have been 35 years ago, but I will never forget it. And I am not the same woman that put up with that 35 years ago. My children are a lot older, and I have changed their attitudes. And I support women in this town, and always will do and always have, in the trade unions and within our residents, because it's not acceptable. It never will be acceptable. And my grandchildren, my granddaughters, my grandsons, none of it will ever happen again in my family. But what I went through was quite violent, and nobody knows about it in here. And I'm very proud of you, because we do need to stand up and speak about it, because it'll never stop if we don't. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Again, thank you for that contribution. Very, very passionate. Councillor Gerrard.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Wakefield, for bringing this motion to the Chamber. I'm fully behind it. I think we need to go a bit further and see about getting active bystanders. I've just done a little bit of research on it, and there's quite a lot of councils have got accreditation getting the active bystanders, where we're actually going out into the community. I think you touched on it, and training people to be an active bystander. In my role as my normal job, I see all walks of life, and you do pick up on signs like you think, maybe I should have intervened there a little bit. Sadly, a lot of people don't. But to bring back this motion, yeah, it is all about violence against women. And I know a couple of people have picked up on about violence against men. But there is another initiative there that we may have to look at in the future, which is the Mankind initiative. Maybe in the future we can look at that as well. But I fully support this. It's about abuse against women, which should never, ever be acceptable in any walk of life, or any religion, creed, race, whatever. It's not on. So, yeah, fully support this, and you have our full backing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gerrard. Can I invite Councillor Wakefield to sum up if she so wishes?
That's if I can decipher my notes. First of all, I just want to say a massive thank you to Councillor Guest and Councillor Callaghan for speaking up. It's incredibly brave, and I know it's very difficult to speak on that, but you are an inspiration to be able to do that, and you make a difference by doing so. So thank you. Right, I'll try and reply as much as I can. Councillor Byrne, I think what you, before it was regards to the definition of Islamophobia, which is not to be confused with anything when we're talking about, definitions of domestic abuse. It becomes very dangerous when we're doing that. Councillor Jones, again, I appreciate you speaking out on that. I just want to go over why we talked mainly about girls and women. This was about the White Ribbon campaign, and if you remember back to the story I told you, it's about changing perceptions with regards to boys and men and the violence towards girls and women. Obviously fully supportive, and our domestic abuse service covers male victims as well, and we are doing specific campaigns around that. I have lots of motions that I can bring back. I will talk about domestic abuse all day long and the services that we provide as a council, so no problem bringing more back, not a problem at all. Councillor Watson, education absolutely starts with education from as young as we can. It's that preventative work. You can't just fight the fire at the top end. We need to start, because they're the perpetrators of the future and also the victims of the future, and we need to make sure that people are fully educated. Councillor Braley, yeah, again, the motion, oh, he's not here, but anyway, the motion is about White Ribbon, which is around violence against girls and women, and again, the statistics show that it is mainly women, and we go back to 2 women a week are killed, 84% of victims are female. Sorry, I didn't pick up on the point, Councillor Jones, as well, about the men under-reporting. Absolutely, that's why we need specific targeted campaigns to get more men to come forward. The abuse that they suffer is completely different and can be completely different, but not to get into the arena where we are excusing violence with violence. Was there anything else I needed to do? Councillor Gerrard, with regard to accreditation, it is something we're looking into already. Everybody here can sign up to be an ambassador of the White Ribbon in their own respect. That is free to do that. And again, more than happy to bring back more motions on this and speak about it all day long to make sure that we keep this as a high priority in the council. And I also just want to thank as well the leader for bringing me back into this role after what I now call my life blip last year. I'm really grateful to be back in this position, and I thank Councillor Flynn for all the hard work that she did whilst I was getting myself together. And I think it's just testament to this council that we even have this role. I don't know of any other council that has a lead member for domestic abuse. And lots of people I speak to are really shocked that this exists, that there's somebody there, prominent, who is working in the position I'm doing, scrutinising policy, making sure that this remains high priority on the council, and that it's given the passion and the time that this deserves to make sure it does remain a high priority on the council. I think I've got round to everybody, so yeah, thank you. And thank you for everybody saying a good group.
Thank you, Councillor Wakefield.
After the mover, but can we have a name vote on this, please? And I'm sure there are 10 people in the room who will support me. Thank you.
Okay, Leader, I think that's indicated by enough people, yeah? More than enough, thank you. So we need to go to the name vote using the electronic voting system. I think we can hold a full council, to be honest. Okay, but I think we've had everybody who's available in here actually voting. Obviously 2 members are currently absent for the vote, and then we will move on, as it is a unanimous vote. Yep, so the vote is very clearly in favour, and that's so motion number 3 has been submitted by Councillor Anderton. Do you wish to?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Am I able to speak now?
You can.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for allowing me to speak on this. Hopefully this motion won't be any political point scoring. Hopefully we can get some consensus on this. But just firstly, can I start with saying that some of us in this room are motorbike enthusiasts, are off-road enthusiasts as well. However, I think the main difference I'm trying to distinguish in this motion is that some of us, well, all of us in here, hopefully know where to do it legally and where it's appropriate to do this. It's a popular activity to use motorised vehicles like quads, like motorbikes, 4x4 vehicles in an off-road manner. But what we're asking today from this is that we do it in a legal manner. It might come as no shock to some of you in the chamber that off-road vehicle use in many of our green spaces, many of which are protected, form part of the NNR, the National Nature Reserve. This has been a long-standing issue, but it's becoming worse and worse as access to vehicles becomes easier and also more diverse with the onset of electric vehicles as well. I know in this chamber we've had motions around the use of electrical scooters and motorised vehicles as well, and I'm kind of pleased that GMP and other authorities are trying to discuss this at a national level to try and tighten up licensing and regulation around the use and ownership of this type of equipment, basically to bring some accountability. Like with your car, if you go and buy a car, you've got to sign your name away, haven't you, and where it's going to be registered with the DVLA. But when it comes to e-bikes and e-scooters, e-motorbikes now, which can go faster than some cars, there's none of that accountability really in that space, and that's something we need to look at. It's a bit of a grey area. But whilst off-roading is a popular recreational activity, I think it's essential to balance up this with the preservation of our natural spaces, but also safety for the visitors to those spaces and safety for those riders as well. And there's several negative consequences that come about when you start to find that these motorised vehicles are in some of our green public spaces. So just to kind of run through a couple here, obviously the clear one, environmental preservation. Canals, country parks are very fragile ecosystems. We have the National Nature Reserve here in the borough with many protected species and endangered species within those areas. So having kind of high-powered vehicles running through these spaces cause lots of damage that we might not see straight away, but we see in a very long term. Soil erosions, degradation of pathways designed to, keep the green boundary in place. So where possible, we must be protecting those spaces and educating those who are seeking to abuse them. Public safety concerns, motor vehicles by their very nature, they've got a motor on them, they're quite powerful and require some responsible handling as well. So having that kind of use in a green space where, the gravel's a bit looser, the mud can be quite loose as well, it's going to endanger pedestrians, it's going to endanger visitors to these green spaces and so on. And it can cause a real safety concern for those users. Cast your minds back to June 2020. We was in the lockdown during that period, but there's a major incident at Bickershire Country Park where a boy of 7 was riding a large quad with his dad of 35 or an older gentleman 35, all reported in the Lee Journal. And both of them came off on the rucks, the old slag heaps. And it took over 3 hours for the emergency services to get to these people. Okay, and it required the mountain rescue to come. So we can say the mountain rescue's been in the borough, but our general equipment is not capable of getting up there. Noise pollution and disturbance. These vehicles, again, designed off-road use, kind of generate high levels of noise and disrupt kind of the tranquility of our country parks. What people go there sometimes to help with their mental health, it's part of social prescribing. But also to get to many of our green spaces, you've got to go through residential estates as well, haven't you? And I'm saying that this activity is not exclusive to just the daytime, 9 till 5. This could be happening all hours of the night. In particular, an example in my own ward, we know there's a particular area, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, they're ripping fences down, sawing fences down. It's noisy, just that activity alone. Then the noise of them trying to get in and kind of rev up their engines to get up the hills and so on. But we know from the COVID years, our parks and green spaces are really important to us. And we are seeing investment from the council into these spaces. We don't want them ruining by such illegal activity. Preservation of other recreational activities. Many people use our country parks, canals, other spaces for fishing, walking, cycling, picnicking, wildlife observation. So the presence of these types of vehicles, when they're being told no, when there are signs up, Section 59 signs saying no access, it is an illegal entry that you're committing here, that's going to affect those people who've gone there for a nice day, for a good day as well. Our green spaces, like Pennington Flash A Hall, do require a footfall. They do require the public to use them, but also respect them as well. Having these kinds of off-road vehicles zooming around compromises your safety as well. The cost and criminal damage, which I've just alluded to, it's not cheap when someone rips a whole fence down with their big 4x4, starts angle grinding particular fences as well. That's a cost to everyone in this room, to the residents outside, to protect green spaces. But it's also a cost to health, well-being as well. I said these spaces are very well used, but if you're in a residential area and you've got these things revving up and down your street at some speed, you think safety of your children, safety of yourself, safety of elderly residents in that particular area. It's the cost to well-being and mental health as well because of the noise and safety concerns that are generated here. We know that some people doing this illegal activity do it within our borough, come from within our borough, some come from outside of our borough. However, it's us, the residents of Wigan, Lee, Ashton, Hindley and so on, who are footing the bill to try and protect and preserve and enhance these green spaces. But I'll put on record, I am a pragmatist. We won't stop everything everywhere tomorrow. But we've got to start somewhere. And that work is kind of underway in a kind of patchwork process at the moment. And it's thanks to our environment team for kind of stepping up with this and working with GMP to look at kind of crime prevention strategies. But we've got to safeguard our environment. So today, what I want to kind of say is this chamber wants to send one clear message, which is if you're thinking of using an off-road vehicle in this borough's green spaces, think again. Off-road activity in our public and protected green spaces is not welcome. Find somewhere else where it is safe, legal, but also supported. These places do exist, and they provide a community of like-minded individuals, but more importantly, it is safe to do it there for the rider, the driver, or whatever we want to class them as. So, considering these concerns, I'm kindly requesting that the Council here support the implementation of measures that clearly prohibit access of these vehicles on things like canals paths, country parks that are in our jurisdiction where we have control. Contact the various stakeholders to bring this matter to their attention and call on them to work with us to prevent this issue. So things like canal paths, not all of them are kind of within our gift, but some are in the Canal Trust and so on. Support GMP also in their efforts in strengthening crime prevention strategies that prevent illegal access into these green spaces and also tighten up the enforcement. So a clear action that I'm asking for today, seeking from the Council, is the establishment of a working group of partners to help problem solve on this particular issue. My ask of residents is, and people in this chamber, to keep reporting to GMP through the formal official channels. GMP Online, Crime Stoppers if you want to remain anonymous. So we build the intelligence, we build the reporting, and hopefully resource will then follow to tackle this. So I firmly believe that by taking this kind of action, we can prevent in the best way we can this kind of illegal activity in our green spaces and maintain the integrity of our natural areas, promote public safety, but also provide a more harmonious recreational environment for everyone involved in this borough. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Anderton. It's my understanding that Councillor Gregory, you wish to second the motion. Do you wish to reserve your right to speak or just formally?
I'll speak now, please.
Yeah, that's okay, that's fine.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, for giving me the opportunity to speak in support of Councillor Anderton's motion, which I'm happy to second. Firstly, can I say what an honour it is to be making this contribution, my first since being elected this May as a Labour councillor for Lowton East. Lowton is a wonderful place full of good people, and I'm thankful that they've placed their trust in me and Councillor Lloyd to be their representatives in this chamber. Since our election, Councillor Lloyd and I have established surgeries in 4 locations across Lowton. The first resident who came to see us raised the issue of off-road or dirt bikes causing a nuisance in the area. The resident described how intimidated they felt by those riding the off-road bikes recklessly in a residential housing estate, often wearing balaclavas to avoid being identified. When challenged, the person riding the bike became threatening and abusive. This experience was shared by other residents of Lowton, describing similar issues and incidents of intimidation by off-road bike riders illegally riding their bikes on green space on land owned by Network Rail. As Councillor Anderton mentioned, not only is this destroying the green spaces, but is also impacting on residents living near to the spaces as the bikes travel illegally along residential streets to access the areas which they are using without permission. We have already raised this with our local neighbourhood policing team. Having this raised so frequently since my election shows that this is a growing problem in my ward as well as across the borough and the country. Off-road bikes and quad bikes are unlikely to be insured, are not confirmed to be roadworthy, and are often ridden by those without a licence or those who are too young to do so. It is illegal to ride them on the public highway, on publicly owned land and on private land without permission. Notwithstanding this, the incident outlined by Councillor Anderton of the major incident at Bickershaw Country Park in 2020 shows that the activity can be dangerous for those riding the bikes, as well as pedestrians and others who may be nearby. On Sunday, it was a privilege to attend the Festival of the Flashes event at Pennington Flash in my ward. So many organisations and individuals came together to showcase the good work being done to promote and protect our green spaces, and I believe that this motion is important to protect these precious spaces from the impact of illegal activities by those riding off-road bikes. As Councillor Anderton outlined, this motion will give council officers and our partners clear direction that we will not accept the safety of individuals accessing our green spaces being compromised by those riding off-road bikes illegally. It will also provide impetus for partnership working between the council and Greater Manchester Police to build and implement strategies to identify who these individuals are and to take enforcement action against them. That is why I wholeheartedly second this motion and ask that it is passed this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Gregory. Are there any other members wishing to contribute to this motion? I think I've got Councillor Taylor first of all.
Okay. Thank you, Mr Mayor, for letting me speak on this motion. I am one of the... there are about quite a few people in here actually ride motorbikes as well as me. I'm glad that Councillor Anderson mentioned the e-bikes. I had an experience this morning going to work actually, and there was an e-bike in front of me. The guy was sat on the bike in no helmet on, dirt clothing, and I was doing 30 miles an hour and he was pulling away from me. So it is a really big problem. Every councillor's got this problem in their ward. Yeah. How we tackle it, I really don't know, because it was on the in the news a couple of months ago when unfortunately those two young lads got killed. And I think that was solely because the police were in pursuit. Like I said, I don't know how we tackle this problem, but thanks for Councillor Anderson for bringing this motion forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Scarlett.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Completely agree with the motion. We've had loads of reports similar in Bryn of off-road vehicles cutting through lights, going through residential areas. I think another thing other than signage, things like that, obviously if you've brought forward, is to put actual barricades on areas like green spaces that need to be protected, making sure that fences, gates, that they can't get through, because it is something that is obviously increasing. From other councillors have had similar reports, very similar as the balaclavas coming through, can't identify them, no licences, a lot more reports like that. So I just want to thank you for bringing the motion forward.
Thank you, Councillor Scarlett. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll tell you what, this is the one you want to keep your eye out for in this chamber. First meeting and speaking like that. Well done, Scarlett. As usual, Councillor Anderson, I support your motion. It's frightening just how much this is going on. Places like the Three Sisters near us. I was in a place in Manchester a couple of months ago. And I have a 3-year-old and a 2-year-old. And what's getting scary now is they seem to be coming down the actual little walkways around the pathways around our green spaces. And with the e-bikes, you can't even hear them coming, like you said yourself. And it's frightening, because when you've got little kids, you all know what they're like. They jolt off into one direction, and that's somewhere where we should be able to let our kids run along a bit, or for dog owners, the same with dogs. So I fully support your motion. I think you know yourself, you're an intelligent man, that it's going to be hard to enforce. I've heard plenty of good ideas. And one of the problems we do face is, let's be honest, boys will always be boys. We've all wanted to go out on bikes. Now, as developments have gone bigger, more houses have been built, there isn't the land that used to be. My mum, the way I'm talking, she'd kill me. She'd think I was saying she was old, but I'm not. My mum talks about when she lived in Ashton as a child, there was fields upon fields upon fields. There was plenty of space for everyone, and it wasn't something that really needed enforcing. So what might be worth an idea, and maybe I'm wrong in saying this, maybe it could look like it's condoning it a little bit too much, but if we actually looked at maybe seeing if we have any council land where obviously they have to be the correct age or be with adults, that we could actually set up a few places where people could take the motorbikes. Because like I said, boys will be boys, so they will find a way of always getting on. You keep shaking your head at me. I agree with everything you say. Boys will be boys. That isn't sexist, is it? Sorry, Mr. Boys, okay. It's sexist. Mr. Mayor, everything's sexist these days. Boys will be boys is a sexist comment. Well, I'll tell you what.
Councillor Jones, we can sort out some equality training.
Okay, I'll carry on with the motion. So, people will be people, or he's will be he's, she's will be she's, or whatever the latest left-wing absolute nonsense comes out with. There's a million different genders, but it still doesn't change the fact that people will still stay on motorbikes. So, going back to my point,
We should look, I think, at sectioning some places off and maybe looking at managing it with private companies or the council where there is areas they can go on motorbikes. Mr Mayor, sorry I went off track a bit. Thank you very much.
Councillor Gerard.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Anderton, for bringing this motion to this chamber. I think that, as has been touched on, this is a problem that every single one in here is experiencing at the moment. For instance, we've got one going on at the moment, so it's been going on now for the best part of 3 years, to try and get a ginnel closed off. But there's already powers available to the council and the police, quite a few actually, more than the Section 59. There's the Countryside and Rights of Way Act 2020, Police Reform Act 2002, Section 59 and 60, Road Traffic Act 1988, Road Traffic Act 1991, Environmental Protection Act 1990, and the Wildlife and Countryside Act 1991. All them give this council and the police powers to seize vehicles, put signage up, put barriers up, which is what is needed. On Agfold, it's just the way the estate is set up. There's a lot of ginnels on Agfold, so the cul-de-sacs can cut out onto the main road. And we've got the off-road bikers screaming down there. So I'm all for this, if we can get these up here, but we need to get our own house in order and look at the inquiries that all councillors are putting in and get the council to act on that as well as just writing to the Prime Minister. We can do it now. I don't know how much ink we've used so far writing to the Prime Minister, but it's getting on quite a bit, you know, so thank you.
Okay, Councillor McSteen.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Just wanted to add a few comments to what is an absolutely fantastic motion. Part of our new ward in Atherton South in Lilford is obviously Lilford Park. It's an area that has had frequent reports of off-road bikes. I've witnessed it myself, alongside the canals at Butts Bridge where I am. And again, we've had issues on Tilsley Road in Hyndesford going up to Atherton. There's been a number of issues there with that, so any amendments or anything that we can do. One point just regarding Lilford Park that's come up recently is that there have been some amendments to the access there which should have prevented motocross bikes, different vehicles getting in. That's also, I've had a resident contact me about her mobility scooter access into the property, so, onto the park. That's showing that this is access into green spaces can be a bit more of a nuanced issue. I'd certainly welcome the opportunity to be on any working group to do with this. Just a couple of other things. We've mentioned e-bikes as a priority. I know that's something that's come up at the Greater Manchester Police Accountability meeting. And we were also told then, and by the previous inspector for our area, about the seizure, the reintroduction of the off-road policing team. There have been bikes seized, certainly in our area. We've had 4 vehicles, we've had quads and bikes seized, crushed, gone. I'd love to see some more of that, and I think it would be fantastic for us to urge for mobilising whatever further resources that we can get into GMP to combat this. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor McSteen. We've got Councillor Braley again.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Why do you not look over here when we press buttons? No. Anyway, Mr Mayor, I'd like to apologise for that.
I'm going to interrupt you and say a point of information, which doesn't exist really, but I do look in your direction quite often.
Yeah. All right, fair enough. Yeah, I'd like to apologise, Mr Mayor, about years. It was just a comment, it weren't offensive. Sorry about that. Right. This motion, I think you've got a hard task. Off-roading is natural. You wouldn't think it is, but it is. It's natural. And these e-bikes now, you've no chance. I mean, at least with a motocross bike, there was knobbly tyres on, and they're not fit for the road. So any weather conditions, you know what I mean? They're just not fit for the road. But these e-bikes, frightening. You know, and a bigger problem you've got is riding off-road cross a bike to a proper track, which there's one in Abram. you need a van or a trailer. And most of these kids can't drive, but they blast around on these bikes. I mean, and that's for like putting gates up and barriers. Yeah, but you're just wasting your time. And it's all about this electric culture we've got. Electric still saw, just a battery on a drill, cut through a gate, cut through a chain. I mean, usually you've got a big still saw, petrol-driven one. But now, with all this electric stuff now, you don't stand a cat in hell's chance of stopping this. And it's been going on for 20 years, I know of. The motion is what's coming through about off-road bikes in the past is phenomenal. But, you know, you keep bringing them up and keep bringing them up. What you need to do is, like Councillor Jones says, get a designated place where they can go, you know, and actually work with them and teach these kids. You know, you do it with naughty kids. They get to go on these special training courses. There's off-road biking, there's fishing, there's whatever they're interested in. You do it for them. Well, why don't we do it in a closer proximity? Find a bit of land for them and get it organised. Teach them to go one way. Get a paramedic out there. I mean, I've worked for the World Championship motocross. I've worked for the British Championship motocross. I've been into motocross a long time, and I've met some fantastic people, and the organisations are fantastic. Like I say, everybody goes wrong the same way. There's a paramedic on site. You know, it's marshals. You go jump over a jump, and if there's an accident to the yellow flag's up, so you're warning. It's very well organised. The motor park in Abram is fantastic, but there's not many about. So why don't we change our stand, you know, and give them what they want, these kids. And I'll tell you something now, the police have scrapped the off-road biking to stop these people. So I'm sorry, Councillor Anderton, you don't stand a cat in hell's chance, mate. Anyway, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Prescott.
Thank you, Councillor. Sorry, Councillor Anderson then. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to speak briefly on this subject, and it's something that is particularly dear to myself and to my wife, Jeanette. My brother-in-law was killed by a motorbike some years ago now. He just returned from active service with the King's Regiment in Northern Ireland, where he'd survived the best attempts to kill him. He died on Christmas Day that year, some short time after he had the incident. Motorbikes, like everything else, are dangerous if not handled properly and not used in the right areas. It's true that we need to do as much as we possibly can do to ensure that off-road motorbikes in particular are driven in a proper manner in the right places. I know there's been a number of suggestions put forward tonight by Councillor Brearley and by Councillor Jones that areas should be found or made available for the individuals to use. I don't think that everyone, if we did have those spaces made available, would use them. The thing for me, as I see it, is that the thrill is breaking the law and not being caught. That's the thrill, it's the chase. And if you did find these places, if they existed, what about the local residents who lived in those areas? What about the issue of noise? Statutory noise nuisance. I just thought I'd say those few things. So it's not just about boys being boys. It's about people being totally and utterly irresponsible, selfish, not thinking of others, and the things that can happen to them, and more importantly to the innocent bypasser or pedestrian. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Prescott. Move on to Councillor Harding.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for allowing me to speak on this. I fully agree with Councillor Prescott. You know, the idea of having set places for off-road bikers to go to is in theory very good. And there's one on Astley Moss actually, and it's well used. And they're responsible off-road bikers, of which there are some. The difficulty is there are many, many others that either don't want to, can't afford, or just couldn't be bothered to get there. And as you said, they don't have trailers, they're underage often, and if they did want to go there, they'd use the streets and roads to get there anyway. So it is a very, very difficult challenge that we face with off-road bikes. The issue of e-bikes, which should only be made to be able to be used up to 15.5 miles per hour legally, the ones above that are illegal for anybody to use on a road. And yet, only yesterday on Oldham Road in Lee, 6 of them passed me when I was in my car, and motorbikes, and all completely illegal, half of them no helmets on, motorbikes not registered. The issue we've got is there needs to be a cultural change. Greater Manchester Police put something on social media locally about 12 months ago. And what it said was that if you report an off-road bike, if you live somewhere and somebody returns having used an off-road bike to their home, if you report that to the police, in the first instance, they'll get a letter, a warning letter to that address saying you've been seen using this, and if you do it again, we'll take the bike off you. The backlash from many members of the public against that was phenomenal. And you know, the abuse basically and trolling on social media to say, oh, well, you know, they're doing no harm, and if you contact the police, you're the grass and this, that and the other. Absolutely stupid. You know, when one of these people are killed, everybody jumps up and goes, oh, he's a nice guy. Well, was he? Or was she? You know, were they a nice person? Because they're just causing havoc across the whole of the county. You know, people used to be sort of see leather-clad bikers as being a very bad thing. Well, I'm a leather-clad biker, and the reason I wear leather is I want 2 cows between me and the road if I hit the road, not a T-shirt and a pair of shorts, because the cow skin, the leather, tends to protect you. So that's why I wear leathers. You know, and indeed, at the Atherton Carnival, I had the pleasure, along with a colleague, of leading a number of chapters who rode in the Atherton Carnival. Leather-clad bikers are very sort of misunderstood. If you see a lot of them, they're generally riding for charity. I was out last Saturday with 72 other bikers riding around the lake for the air ambulance. So you will see that please don't prejudge people, you know, but the difficulty is that a lot of our young people who are underage using off-road bikes. There's no simple answer to this, no simple answer. Appreciate what was said, you know, but Councillor Briley's idea that people will cut things off is perfectly true. I used to live where the sports village now in Lee is, when it was fields, and they were constantly up and down, and there was ditches, and those ditches were dug deeper, and they put sleepers across and carried on, and nothing changed. So it is a major, major issue that we need to get to grips with, but there's no easy answer. But I would think that one of those elements is to support what Greater Manchester Police have suggested, that when people see off-road bikes leaving properties and going back, report it. Because the first instance, they'll get a letter, and the second instance, they'll lose the bike. The Section 59 notices that are up all over the place is a classic. As soon as they go past that sign, they're now illegal, and they can have the bike seized. But we need to publicise it much, much more than we do. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Harding. Councillor Hulton.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I completely agree with all this motion and what Councillor Prescott's just said and Councillor Harding. Now, I may be just going a little bit away from this motion, but I also agree with the gates. But one of my residents in Lowton East got trapped going through the staggered gates, you know what I mean, either side and one in the middle. Now, the officers, when I mentioned this on the members' inquiry, they were very good. They've sent out a team and they've widened the barriers. So if we are going to put these staggered gates, can we just bear in mind that nowadays a lot of people are on these mobility scooters, and when the gates were first put up, it was push bikes and prams. Now the mobility scooters are quite large, so if we're going to design these, can we please make them a little bit broader and bear in mind that people have got to stagger around, and my resident was petrified, thought he was not going to get out of these gates. But like I said, I put in a members' inquiry. The department was superb. They've been out and they've widened it. So his regular trip now to the doctors is a lot easier and safer. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hulton. Councillor Wakefield.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I just couldn't resist picking up on the boys will be boys. And yeah, you can call me the equality police. It wasn't that it was sexist, it's negative stereotyping of boys and excusing bad behaviour. And we just have to...
Councillor Jones, could you please indicate which part of your early speech appears to have been misunderstood and then clarify it?
The council said was right. However, they'll probably still try and do it, so let's do this as well. So it wasn't condoning it. And it, okay? Thank you,
I think we'll
Mr.
let
Mayor.
Councillor Wakefield carry on.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Like I say, it can be seen as negative stereotyping, which I'm sure you don't want against boys, and excusing bad behaviour.
Councillor Jones, could you just let Councillor Wakefield...
Like I say, I'm just picking it up from an equalities point of view. And it may be of surprise that also girls also like riding bikes. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wakefield.
Wow, what a debate. I think there's a lot of knowledge, good points we can take away from that. So I'll try and address them all. But again, I think one headline is it's clearly an important issue. And part of the motion is an ask that we do set up a working group, the officers set up a working group, and that might, you know, involve some elected member involvement in terms of a workshop of some sort to get all these ideas back in. But just to make a quick distinction as well, I tried to focus the motion as well on our green spaces. So if you are seeing any of these kinds of activities on our highways, that's very much a transport police issue. It's very much a GMP. Get it reported, get it noted, and that will go through to the traffic cops on that one. But absolutely, it's all interlinked, I agree. And what I've tried to do with this motion is come at it from the green spaces. Sadly as well, I'll jump ahead a little bit. The off-road bike team is back. So it hasn't been dissolved and gone and we don't have one. There's a traffic unit now that can tackle these kinds of things. However, it's very small. And one thing that the unit cannot do, and what I'm hearing as well, is people in balaclavas, no helmet. You can't chase them at 80, 90 miles an hour. The police won't do it because of all the incidents that can come from that and the fact that you can be causing death as well. So it's just, I think this is where the working group comes in. And it goes back to Councillor Gerrard's point. There are powers, like, absolutely. But are we coordinating them effectively? And I think that's where, we're looking inside, get a working group up of the officers, and those who are in the know, those who have this expertise as well, then bring in those other stakeholders like the Canal and River Trust Bridgewater Canal as well on that. The gates as well, I think you raise a very interesting point around the gates. I think that's something, again, for the working group. What works best? There are a number of gates used out there, and we need to look at ones which are better for the green spaces to keep them protected. However, what I've kind of heard, it's about safety, isn't it? Safety of residents, safety of the rider as well. And listen to Councillor Prescott's account as well then. It just hits it home, doesn't it, about how this activity can quickly go wrong. And the incident I mentioned in June 2020, luckily the two people involved in that, the young child and the adult, made a successful recovery, but we're in a serious condition for some time. But going back to what Councillor Harding said as well, and others, education is this. We've got to get some messaging, haven't we? Something around community safety, place and community safety as well, to kind of help with this. But equally, there are places to go. I understand, Councillor Brearley, your point. How do they get there? But even if we make a space elsewhere, I don't really have any sites in Hindley Green you want to suggest, but how do we still get them there? You know, how do we get people there? That is a big issue. Yeah, so I'm just going to leave it at that, but I think thank you for all your contributions. There's clearly a lot of ideas, knowledge sat in this room, which I'm sure the working group might want to just tap into at some point through a workshop exercise. So thank you for all that.
Okay. I think I'll put the motion to the vote now. All those in favour, please show. Fantastic. That's passed unanimously. Motion number 4 has been submitted by Councillor Jones, and that's set out on page 96 of the agenda. I understand this motion will be referred to Cabinet without debate in accordance with Rule Procedure 9.8, and the motion will come back to a future meeting of the Council for consideration. Item 5, it's a motion that's been submitted by Councillor Bullen, which is on page 97 of the agenda. Councillor Bullen, do you wish to move your motion?
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. I'm bringing this motion because of concern for the health of our young people. Vapes or e-cigarettes are becoming increasingly popular among teenagers who are not former or current smokers. And there's been a rise in experimental vaping among children. In 2023, Action on Smoking and Health, called ASH, good word, reported that 20.5% of children had tried vaping, and this had gone up from 15.8% in 2022 and 13% in 2020. 2 out of the 5 young people said they'd smoke vapes just to give it a try, and 1 in 5 because other people use them, so I join in. However, some vapes have been found to contain unsafe levels of metals, including lead, nickel, and chromium. An analysis of vapes used in schools showed children using them could be inhaling more than twice the daily safe amount of lead and 9 times the safe amount of nickel. Brightly coloured disposable vapes, which are available in a variety of flavours, are the most popular product among teens, and most are bought from corner shops. 48% of 11 to 17-year-olds who vape are purchasing from local small shops. Teachers and parents have expressed concern about the increasing availability of the products and the fact that some pupils say they've become addicted to nicotine through this vaping. Under law, of course, the sale of nicotine products to people under 18 is banned, but we know that shopkeepers are flouting the law, and some companies are giving away free samples, thousands of them actually. In the past year, thousands were given the free vapes, again, according to the ASH research. And Linda Bold, who's a professor of public health at Edinburgh University, said, although vaping was far less harmful than smoking for children, the longer-term risks were not fully understood, and I think that is a major concern. She says, we do know there are toxins and carcinogens in vape products, albeit at lower or trace levels. And if those are exposed to young developing lungs, particularly chronically over a long period, there may well be a risk associated with that. And as I say, I think that is the big issue on health. Disposable or single-use vapes are the most popular with children. And these vapes, along with the batteries inside them, are ending up in landfills, something I'd not thought about until I read it this week, where the toxic chemicals are polluting our soil and water. The government's announcement on a new enforcement drive is welcome, as is the news that pupils will be taught about the health risk of vaping in lessons as part of the ongoing government review of the curriculum. And that resource pack for schools on vaping, which is intended for 11 to 13-year-olds, will be rolled out very soon now. These moves are very welcome, but I see it that unless the marketing of vapes at source is tackled, the impact will be minimal. The Prime Minister actually called the marketing of vaping products to children as shameful. And Labour's Shadow Health Secretary Wes Streeting pledges that the next Labour government will come down like a ton of bricks on those pushing vapes to kids. It's easy to see how attractive these vapes have been made to look for children. Bright colours, fluorescent pink, green and yellow. Some look just like highlighter pens. Flavours like sweet shop mix, gummy bears and cherry cola. Small canisters that can be easily hidden in the fist. In my ward, the number of small shops that have opened selling vapes has increased significantly. Seems to be in my ward that if there's an empty shop, it's very likely to become a vape shop. And I'm sure you're seeing the same in your wards too. And I feel that we cannot stand by while scrupulous marketeers and traders make an easy profit at the expense of the health of our young people. So I'm asking in this motion for everybody's support for our trading standards in providing advice to business. And I'm pleased to tell you that we're well on with this already in Wigan. And the guidance document that Wigan produced has been adopted by other authorities in the North West because it's seen as very good practice. But I also want to ask Council for support for enforcement where necessary to protect and safeguard our children from the harmful effects of vaping and e-cigarettes. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bullen. Councillor Hurst, I believe you wish to second it. Do you wish to reserve your right to speak or speak now?
I'll speak now, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for allowing me to second this motion. Following several reports in the media showing an increase in underage sales of vapes, including those containing high levels of dangerous chemicals, I'm happy to support this motion from Councillor Bullen. The basic concept behind the introduction of this technology was to make smoking and tobacco-related harm obsolete. But the unintended consequences need to be looked into urgently, and especially the harm that it can cause to our children's health. Recently, there has been growing concerns about the increasing use of vapes, and particularly disposable vapes, by those under age of 18. There's been increasing evidence of poor compliance of the 2015 regulations and the ban on sales of nicotine containing vapes to those aged under 18. A test programme run by the Chartered Trading Standards Institute, for example, reported that vapes were sold to under 18s on 145 out of 442 occasions, representing an overall non-compliance rate of 33%. Action on Smoking and Health reported that 48% of 11 to 17-year-olds purchase their vapes from shops. Selling to under 18s is illegal. Despite this, shops place these products next to sweet shelves, and unlike cigarettes, they are often on open display with attractive child-friendly packaging. The internet has seen an explosion of these products that are exploiting young minds. Many firms are using imaging and flavouring to attract the young. Just two of these I will mention. One has a rabbit in a hat on it and flavours including frozen strawberry and banana milkshake, and another from Dank Vapes has a picture of a big cake in the flavour of blueberry muffin on it. Wonder who they're actually targeting, these people. Ministers had the chance to stop this 2 years ago during the passage of the Health and Care Bill, when Labour tabled an amendment to prohibiting branding that appeals to children, but Conservative members voted it down. And since then, underage vaping has increased by almost 50%. As Councillor Bullen stated, vapes are not harmless. Short-term effects of using them can include coughing, headaches, dizziness and sore throats. The long-term risk of using vapes on children and young people is still unknown. There is also a growing trend in research that is showing that young people who vape may be more likely to smoke cigarettes in the future. The health risks of smoking tobacco is well evidenced. It does appear that far from taking young people away from harmful cigarettes, vaping is actually leading them into smoking. In Hartlepool, concerns have been raised about an increase in primary school children using vapes. In Devon, schools have reported confiscating e-cigarettes from children as young as 7. Those claims seem to be reinforced by the fact that last year, 15 children aged 9 or under were hospitalised due to vaping, with health experts warning that the excessive use of e-cigarettes in children could be linked to lung collapse, lung bleeding and air leak. In Yorkshire and the Humber, it's estimated that 30% of secondary school students have tried vaping, which equates to around 109,000 children. We ask that this council supports the efforts being made by our trading standards team, alongside schools and other stakeholders, to tackle this illegal practice. In doing so, we will send a clear message that this is not acceptable in the Wigan Borough. I'm happy to second this motion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hurst. Councillor Cleave.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, for allowing me to speak. And thank you, Councillor Bullen and Councillor Hurst, for bringing this motion to Council. Only this afternoon, I have actually been in a meeting with Trading Standards, who's highlighted the fantastic work they are doing. Over the recent weeks, I'm sure you've all seen in the press how many successful raids they have had in Wigan Borough. In fact, one trader had over £3,000 worth of vapes removed from him. There is lots more to do, but they are on with it. They're doing a fantastic job. We have more premises in our sites where we are looking at raids. So I personally like to thank all our Trading Standards team in regulatory services and keep up the fantastic work they're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cleave. Councillor Prescott.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I just want to talk about the issue of smoking in general, and it relates directly to what we're talking about now. Under the last Labour government, legislation was introduced to dissuade and to stop smoking in public spaces. So we had the legislation on not smoking in pubs, etc. The logic behind that was because people had a brand loyalty. So you could be smoking one type of cigarette, it was advertised as that type. You had a brand loyalty to it. So what the legislation did, it obscured that make, and it was sold from behind screens in shops, and etc. If you go into the Grand Arcade now and look at some of the premises there, the different types of e-cigarettes are stacked up for everyone to see. And they look like sweets, they look like sticks of rock. What's actually happening is that as prevalence of smoking fell, the numbers fell, this type of smoking under a different guise was introduced by the very people who were the tobacco companies themselves. What they are doing now is replacing one generation with other generations. And we have people, young people, who at this moment in time do not realise the consequences of their actions being drawn into that situation. So I fully support the motion that Councillor Bullen and Councillor Hurst have put before us tonight. And we should, as a responsible authority, ban the sale of e-cigarettes to young people. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Prescott. Councillor Gerard.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you for fetching this motion to the Chamber. I fully support this motion. I see it in my job, and I'll keep relating to this, and it's probably like an old record, but there is a school pretty close by to here where they get on the bus in the morning and in the afternoon. The first thing they sit down and vape, and I have to read them the right act to stop, or they're getting off and walking, basically. So it is quite prevalent, this problem we have with vaping. And I think we need to encourage traders to sign up to an out of sight, out of reach campaign. So all the vapes are behind a screen. We need them to sign up to. I've only just found out, and I never knew this. It's not mandatory for the shops to show an age restriction on the age signage on the shops, so we can get maybe voluntary to sign up to that. Not voluntary, but mandatory. Just say we need to look at that through licensing, maybe, to put signage up. Yeah, but I fully support this, but we have to be careful. We were saying about the alternative to smoking. Vaping is still a lot more safer than actual tobacco smoking. So we have to find the fine line. And again, it's all down to education at the schools about smoking and vaping and just getting the message across that neither is good for you, no matter if it smells like chocolate or sweet cherry. But yeah, fully support this, and I wish you very successful.
Thank you, Councillor Gerard. We move on to Councillor Jones.
I feel like I've done a workout today, I keep getting up and down. I'm going to be very careful what I say as well, so I don't get in trouble. I support Councillor Bullen's motion, first of all. like many of you, when you're going around doing your litter picks, your clean-ups, it's unbelievable how many you see, and especially around the shops. So there's no doubt that they're coming from shops, market traders, different things like that. And I can't believe I'm going to actually say this, but I think this is a motion which wouldn't have been the worst add-on to say maybe we should write to the government, although I criticised it before. The only that I am supporting Councillor Bullen's motion, the only problem is I see with this motion is because I think motions should have some backbone and some meat to them. So the only problems that I see is it says the council should support its efforts on our trading standards team. Well, the trading standards team is our team. So I'd like to know some detail on what support we're going to give them exactly, what powers, etc. And just in finishing, so like I said, I do support your motion, Councillor Bullen. But just in finishing, I am concerned when you say about the dangerous chemicals as well, because as I've just added to it, we're cutting that many trees down so the leader can write to the government to criticise them. We're going to have nothing to soak these chemicals up with. And one last thing in closing, I am so happy that I found out today that this council, this Labour council, finally know what genders are, and they actually now can answer the question as, what is a female? Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor McLaughlin.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It's often claimed that vaping is less dangerous than smoking, but it depends on the context. I mean, if you're a smoker who's trying to quit, well, it might be worth reflecting whether vaping is less dangerous than smoking. But also, it's a kind of unsupported statement. If vaping is less dangerous than smoking, why aren't there any statistics on it? Why can't they say that smoking's 3 times more dangerous or 4 times more dangerous, etc.? And, you know, the trouble I have with that statement is less dangerous than smoking. It's one of the most dangerous things you can think about. Nearly everything's going to be less dangerous than smoking, isn't it? The old Prime Minister, Ted Heath, he came up with a phrase once about the unacceptable face of capitalism. It was about a firm called Lonhro and a fellow called Tiny Rowland, but that's all history. I think we're seeing another unacceptable face of capitalism now, because what we've got is we've got certain people exploiting this country's children. They don't care about what they're doing for the children. You know, and it's been mentioned that vaping does cause harm. There's several authorities have been cited tonight, and several experts too. And, you know, at the end of the day, these irresponsible capitalists take the profit. And, you know, any health harms that befall our children, well, it's the NHS who picks up the bill, and we all know who funds the NHS. So those capitalists get the profit, and we pay to repair the damage that they've done. And the other thing is, my final point, I know of no regulation on vaping. I may be wrong because I haven't researched it, but I think there's a serious need for regulation. So thank you, I support the motion, and I hope everybody else does too.
Thank you, Councillor McLaughlin. Councillor Davis, just to clarify, did you want to come in?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a few words to support this motion. If you remember on Councillors' Places Committee about 2 months ago, I brought in a used vape and to the committee to find out the dangers of these vapours, which will be going into landfill. And now we know of the poisons and the liquids which can explode either in bins or going to the landfills by our work teams. Health and safety must be a top priority in this. Health for our younger generations, especially in our schools, and safety, don't forget our work lads who does a fantastic jobs on our bins, so we've got to protect our workforce as well. Thank you very much. Support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. We move back to Councillor Bullen to sum up, if she so wishes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just quickly, because time's getting on, I'd just like to thank elected members for the support for this motion, and just picking out 1 or 2 points really. Councillor Cleeve's comments about her first-hand experience of the work of our trading standards, I think very much supported what I'd said. Councillor Prescott, it was a very interesting point about smoking in public places, because nicotine smoking can't be done in public places. And this is another thing about the vaping, isn't it? And I said, it's held in the fist, and people are just continually using it, which must be a major health issue as well, and highlighting the risks to our young people. Councillor Gerard, I agree with what you're saying. We would like these vapes and e-cigarettes to be treated like cigarettes and be behind those shutters in shops, and for the advertising and the freebies to be sorted out, because that's a major point. But what I will mention to you is, when I talked about the guidance that's being given by trading standards, one of those, the conversation that's going on with traders is to remind them of the law and the banning pre-18, and having a discussion with traders about the age checks and advising them how this can be done, because I think that really has gone out by the board for a good while with these vapes, and it's bringing that in, but doing it with guidance and encouraging traders to do the right thing. And I think also you mentioned the risks, as I did, the risks that we don't know about. And I know Councillor McLaughlin mentioned this as well. And you know, top professors are saying, we actually don't know the long-term effects, which is very, very worrying. And I've thought for a while, when vapes were first recommended by doctors to help people give up that nicotine in cigarettes, and the effects of cigarette smoking. And I did wonder at the time, if we've got these vapes now, because it's inhaling damp, isn't it, moisture, and we know that is likely to be very damaging to our lungs. So, Councillor Jones, thank you for your support. Oh, he's gone. And the comments that he made about seeing them litter picking, we all have this. We know it's there. It absolutely is. And asking for what we were doing. Well, really, the support that we are being asked for in the motion is through education, supporting schools where they're developing their policies and encouraging them to use the new guidance that's coming in through the national curriculum with students. It's the guidance that I've talked about with trading standards, and we know our people are out there doing that. And then it's, you know, the final straw really, the last straw of course, is the enforcement. And we have evidence, and Councillor Cleeve mentioned this, there are actually closure orders being issued. So hopefully this will help with the control. Councillor McLaughlin, you've talked about the dangers. We don't know what the dangers are. This then puts pressure. If we've got a lot of chronic sickness, This is putting pressure on our NHS, isn't it? And Councillor Davis, I think you mentioned again that issue about the landfill, not the actual using, but where they're being disposed of. And of course, we're litter picking them. They're going in bags and they're going in landfill, which is a danger to all of us. So thank you so much for all your comments of support. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bullen. Can I put this motion to the vote? All those in favour, please show. Fantastic. Another unanimous vote in favour. Thank you. That concludes tonight's business, and have a safe journey home.